Here we are. Yeah, this video has got a bit of a ponderous title, The Yoga of Royal Knowledge and Mystery, which I actually I just stole that title, sadly. I've been listening to recitation of the Bhagavad Gita, um, which is really, really good. So if you type into YouTube Bhagavad Gita, even if you write it incorrectly, like I'm doing right now, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1, for example, you might come across oh, it's there. There's a channel called Gaia Sanskrit. I think I'm going to just write this into the, oops, 1 second. I'm going to put this into the chat. So if anybody wants to check that out, it's a real, of course, it's not going to copy and paste, is it? No. So it's a really good channel. Anyway, let me see if I can just copy this down, because the channel is worth. Dude, isn't this typical? Just when you're trying to do something, nothing wants to work in your computer, and it's written slightly strange. There is Gaia Sanskrit. Yeah. So this Sanskrit channel is. She sings the whole of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter by chapter. So it's really, really good. One of the chapters is called The Yoga of Royal Knowledge and Wisdom. I think that's chapter 10 or 11, but it's really good. It's a really, really good channel. So yeah, there's that. That's a really good channel. There's another really good channel too, which is yeah. This guy is awesome too, man. This guy is. I'm going to put this down too. This is here. Let me just put this down in the in the chat, which people can view later, I guess. The Bhagavad Gita Class by Swami Tadatmananda. He's like I don't know if he's American. I think he must be American. He's got a very strange, like poised voice, but great. I love that guy. Just really good classes, really good education, really humble, and worthwhile listening to that guy. Worthwhile, both of them. The Sanskrit class by Tadatmananda is, it's a class, right? But it's knowledgeable and it's cool. So he recites it also in Sanskrit. He like chants it in Sanskrit, and he does it in a way where he does one line, then you do one line, then he does one line, and then you do one line, and then he goes into like a discourse about the significance of it. So I think there's like 138 lectures about an hour long, which I haven't done too many of, but I've listened to a lot of his other stuff, and it's really good quality material. Sanskrit is really interesting. I'm not like I can't really commit to learning it, but like I was reading something the other day that made me think, man, I should learn Sanskrit. So I think what's interesting about Sanskrit is that apparently the way it works is that yeah, I'm not an expert in Sanskrit. This is like one lesson I saw in this, but it really piqued my interest. So, for example, with Hebrew, one of the things with Hebrew is each letter in the Hebrew language is actually has like a word or an image associated with it, right? So, was it like Aleph? Like A is like an oxen or something? I can't remember what it is, right? So it's got like what's the word I'm looking for here? So the language is it's got a different. There's layers of meaning in the letters themselves. And so for example, there's interesting books which I've spoken about in the past. There's one in particular called the Cipher of Genesis, which and the Cipher of Genesis points out that the Bible is actually got a whole layer of meaning which was never translated, right? Because the letters themselves have significance, that layer of meaning wasn't translated to English. So what the English-speaking world is dealing with is actually the just the literal meaning, right? And that kind of makes sense in some ways. There's a whole bunch of meanings associated. And so, for example, in some of the magical texts, is, I think the most obvious one is Franz Bardon, the Key to the True Kabbalah. One of the things there is they're using the language as a key, right? The letters themselves. And I think probably the best, Franz Bardon's obviously translated from Czech, but William Gray, who is the English magician, he's got a bunch of books whose names I can't. Probably the most common, the most famous one is, I think it's called Ladder of Lights. I think it's called. But what that's about actually is about how he actually explains it really well. And what he does is he resources the Old English alphabet. I think one of the things is like, so for example, Kabbalistic magic is done using the Hebrew alphabet. And of course, how many letters does that have? How many letters? Hebrew alphabet. Let's just see how many it's got. 22 letters. Okay, so I don't even know how that works then. Yeah. Anyway, what William Gray does, he ends up using some of the Old English letters to substitute for some of the Hebrew letters. And he's got some pretty good explanations of why he does that. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because that seems like, oh wow, there's a whole layer of meaning there. And the thing with the Kabbalistic intonations of the notes, that's really, really powerful. At one point, something happens to me, like a lot of times when I read religious text or magical text, it's like there's like an instant transportation to that space in consciousness. So I can tell if it's valid or not because it's instantly perceivable to me, and so that was happening back in the day with some of the Kabbalistic stuff. Like some of the stuff I had to stop reading it because it got too deep too quickly, So there was like and not even like I think it's almost like there's layers in that hierarchy of divinity or whatever you want to call it. And there's certain layers which you're probably not permitted to enter. But then sometimes you can enter it, but you feel it pretty quickly that you shouldn't be there. You're sort of made not welcome to be in those spaces. So that was certainly happening with the Kabbalistic stuff. And then I haven't really studied at all Sanskrit, but what's interesting about the Sanskrit stuff is while the Hebrew has got that sort of layer of meaning, what was interesting about the Sanskrit was that Sanskrit also has a layer of meaning, but it's very distinct. So this is interesting, is the way Sanskrit, the layer of meaning that Sanskrit has is it's actually anchored in the physiology of the human body, which really I still have got to wrap my head around this, but it was such an interesting revelation that it made me think, I need to learn Sanskrit. So, for example, one of the things I was hearing was it was like if you got a letter like is focused down here, and if you're doing ooh, that's sort of focused out here. So there's like if you actually focus on like where the generation point of that is, like ooh, e is sort of in the middle, right? So there's names for that in linguistics. Like in linguistics, which I haven't really studied. I took a couple of classes back when I was in college, but there's like names for like where the emanation point of letters are, right? So the only one I can remember is if you use like F, like f, that's called a fricative. That's like the location of its emanation, right? True life stories back in the day, man. Hope you're well, dude. Yeah. So what was I gonna say? Yeah. So that whole thing with like the emanation point of the letter. So the way the Sanskrit works is the emanation point is actually like, so the letters are structured based on like emanation points of the physiology. So that's like a really interesting thing, magically speaking, right? So it's almost like in Hebrew, you've got that sort of layer. I'm not quite, I mean, it seems to me that if you got a letter which means ox, that's not really based on the physiology. Maybe it's based on the physiology of an ox. I don't know. But the actual physical location, that seems to me like it's a bit of an index. It's like an index into something pretty deep, like into the actual architecture of the human body, right? Which, hey, vegan dolls, nice to see you magically speaking too. I've actually got nothing to talk about tonight, really. I just thought I haven't done a video in like so long, I should come on. And I had actually absolutely nothing to talk about. But then I just remembered the whole thing, like the Sanskrit stuff is so unbelievable. What's interesting is there are some texts, and this is the funny thing, is that a lot of religious texts, it's like easy. Maybe you felt this, like you'll pick up the Bible and you'll read it and you think, dude, this is such unbelievable nonsense, But there's a lot of I think the problem is a lot of these texts have a lot of contexts we don't understand, right? And like one of the things is one of the cool things about Bhagavad Gita is it just kind of is what it is. Well, it's not really, but it just it's a simpler text to understand than say the Bible, right? And and these texts have I'm let's just call it an astral component. I don't even know if it is an astral component, but you can certainly access that when you read it, right? So, for example, the other night I'm listening to the Gaia Sanskrit. She was singing it's amazing. You've got to listen to that Gaia. Listen to Gaia Sanskrit. Her name's in the chat. Listen to, I was doing it like one chapter a night, and each chapter is like 15 minutes. It's not a big investment of time, right? Chapter 11 is like the biggest one, and that's like 20 minutes. In chapter 11, chapter 10 and 11 of that's interesting, vegan dolls. The Gita is amazing. It's got a vibe to it, and it's one of these texts that when I read it or just singing it, or when she was singing it the other night, just dude, this is the magical world just evoked. It's unbelievable. So that is one of these. It's one of these things. And I was going through a lot of the Kundalini experiences. I was having a lot of experiences with Krishna and the Gita, and the letters of the Gita um, were golden. And so this is the thing, is like it's really easy, to say that these works were written by humans, right? They're written by humans. And so a lot of the biblical people will say, no, it's the word of God. But then there's clearly an editing process that goes on and whatnot, right? But there's something going on with these texts when you can access them from a different level of consciousness than just the physical level. So like I guess it's like a sort of astral overlay or something, but you can clearly enter into that, and it's astonishingly beautiful. Kind of frightening sometimes because you're moving into states of consciousness that are sort of non-typical, but really really good. Essentially, the Bhagavad Gita is essentially a work of non-duality, right? I mean, it seems like it's about Krishna talking to Arjuna, right? But it seems to me like just listening to Tadatmananda, what's his name? Swami Tadatmananda. I said it right. Swami Tadatmananda was saying this, was that it's really, Krishna is really presenting himself as part of it's like your own divine self. It's like your higher self, if you will, right? But I think we tend to think the higher self is something approachable, right? But it's really not. The higher self is yeah, is really higher. It's really higher. Yeah, I agree. I think it's the simplest way of explaining the deepest truths. It really is. It's the best book. Um, and yeah, I think probably the biblical stuff goes there too. But I mean, there's just so much narrative and whatnot. Although there's a lot of really interesting stuff in that too. Like there's a lot of hidden meaning in there. I was watching some guy. I don't know. I can't remember enough about it to really bring it up in discussion. But I was watching a guy a month or so ago who's talking about the Bible. And in the Bible, a lot of times there's parts of the Bible where it goes through like a genealogy, like son of this, son of that, son of this, son of that. And you're like, what is going on, dude? But this guy was explaining why it's structured that way. And once you get it into context, it was like, oh, right. Interesting true life stories. Yeah, I think what happens is like if you listen on mushrooms or something, you'll be able to get this vibe. I had this Kundalini awakening a few years ago, so now it's like it just happens like without taking anything. But I think when dude, Krishna. My first experience with Krishna was during ayahuasca ceremony, right? So my shaman is a devotee of Satya Sai Baba and spent some time in India and stuff. And then often during ceremonies, like there'd be like just these moments where Krishna would come into the room or Shiva would come into the room, and you're just like astonished. It's so astonishing. Like nobody would believe it if they could have access to that level of understanding, right? It's not even a level of understanding; it's a level of experience because you don't really understand it. It's just like this experience. You're like, oh, there really is something else here, right? Um, there's other things there too. Like there was one time, like we were one night in ceremony, there was a procession of spirits coming through, and then this one spirit comes in, and it just comes into the room, and everybody just vomits instantly. Everybody, because it was just the presence of that spirit was so overwhelming that no human could manage that. Unbelievable. But then those moments with Krishna were sort of more, it was more about you became aware of the space of consciousness, which generally as humans, we don't have access to that, like typically, I guess. But once you become aware of it, um, yeah. I think the thing to do, I think a lot of the problem, if there's no problem, but if there was a problem, I mean, a lot of us have done or still do plants or whatever. And nobody really learns to truly meditate, right? Not nobody, but there's a lot of like bullshit meditation going on, right? And so, I mean, I guess that's kind of where I'm at now is just trying to sort of teach people how to meditate properly, right? As much as I can, but properly. I mean, my way of meditating is hardly doctrinal either, but like just to get people to connect to the to this layer of awareness, which is non-ordinary, because then if you can connect to that, you don't have to take plants anymore, right? Although I do miss them. I've got a bottle of mushrooms here somewhere, and I keep looking at it, but it's like I can't even touch that stuff, man. I had some. I bought some rapé the other day, like some of the Amazonic tobacco, which I haven't done in a year or two. At one point, like 3 years ago, I was really abusing that like pretty heavily, but I haven't done it in a long time. But I got some the other day, and wow, even just the tobacco, which is non-hallucinogenic, but yeah, whatever. That totally takes you to a sort of space. And it's funny because, like, when you insufflate the tobacco, that goes into your sinuses, or not, what was this, your sinuses here, I guess, right? So it goes up into this space. And, I guess it stays up there for a couple of days, right? But that presence of the tobacco, I mean, it stays for more than the main experience is for 15 minutes, right? But then dissipates. But just because it's still there, there's still a sort of connection I've had for a couple of days. When I took ayahuasca, I took it with fire. Dude, what are you doing, dude? I was giving to people, showing them, yeah, dude, you're a brave psychonaut, dude. You crazy bastard. It's funny, man. Back in the day, dude, we did lots of crazy stuff with the medicine. What you should try, True Life Stories, is try to get some of the Amazonian dieta plants. But if you get those plants, you have to be really careful with them. They're dangerous. They're not yeah, they're dangerous because they're. I think one of the things that happens is like the Amazonian plants. I haven't seen that show, by the way, Vegan Dolls, but the Amazonian plants have very strong personalities, right? And so a few people. This is not discussed widely, but every year there's some suicides that happen in the Amazon dieta circles, right? Because the dietas have very strict. I know, like with ayahuasca, there's like the strict diet, but everybody like blows it off, right? But with those plants, you can't really blow it off, dude. It's really fucking dangerous. Like a foolish mortal, I played around with the limits of those, and it's extremely dangerous, dude. But it's worth doing them because what those plants. Because I think what happens is something like mushrooms, which are incredibly powerful, but they're sort of more of a general psychedelic. Whereas you get into the Amazonian plants, and I don't even think you can categorize them the same way because they're. I mean, a lot of people think they're not they're psychedelic, but they work more like on consciousness, and they work on. They have real specific. They have real specific functions, I guess, and it's still. It's not general like with mushrooms. You can take. Who knows what's going to happen if you take mushrooms, right? Same thing with ayahuasca, right? But if you get into like a plant like Shiwawaku or Bobinsana or Sharik Sanango, which is really dangerous, or right these plants, those plants are they change you permanently, right? So I think we can joke around like, oh, I did ayahuasca with 5 grams of shrooms, did right? But like I think when you do the and ayahuasca can change you too, right? But if you do these other plants, they've got a specific life-changing effect, which seems to be permanent. Vegan Dolls, you're opening up. I had no idea that you'd done psychedelics for your teenhoods. You see, when I was a teen, I was incredibly naive, I didn't really drink until I was like 22 or something. Yeah, this is the problem. It's really easy to do too much. Like the last time I did San Pedro, it was just that moment when the channels of consciousness open up and you're like, oh fuck, right? But those plants, yeah, like dude, True Life Stories. I mean, you're like super experienced and stuff, man. Like that would be a really challenging. It'd be challenging because you know what? Do you know what the funny thing is, dude? The funny thing. Here's the thing. This is my theory. This is not even my theory. This is. I think I'm going to say that this is fact. The fact is that those dieta plants demand us to sort of be disciplined and to respect their space. So I think this is what happens is like if we imagine that there's like a specific bandwidth, let's say the humans got a bandwidth of 20 megahertz or something, right? And then like if you take a plant like Shiwawagu is going to take up most of that bandwidth. So you're sort of basically sharing your consciousness with the plant. But those plants in the jungle, in the jungle, the plants they're competing for life, right? They're competing for bandwidth in many ways. Some of them work together, right? Some of them work together. You've got the vines which wrap around the trees, so they're working with the trees, right? Ayahuasca being number one of those. But obviously, if there was like some kind of like weed which came in and was trying to take the bandwidth of the tree would just like wipe it out, right? So this is what happens with these dietas is like if you go into a dieta and you're sharing bandwidth with a tree and you don't respect the bandwidth, woe betide what happens to you, right? Um, it's very so yeah, in my own experience, like doing that, you can like the plants will turn on you and things get really evil. They get really dark really quickly because they try and kill you. They try and destroy you. Um, and so, yeah, so like that happened a couple of times to me, and I would like go into prayer, and if you pray and sort of if you like a lot of times too, like doing a mantra, like the Om Mani Padme Hum got me out of some really difficult times. But that what happens is if you can crystallize your consciousness in like royal state. Let me tie it back into the name of this video, which is the royal. It's like you into you if you show it that you've actually got some kind of command of consciousness and you're not just abusing it, then they, in my experience, you can sometimes get like forgiven, right? But it's extremely dangerous. And there was a very experienced dieta guy who'd done years and years of dieta in the jungle, and he killed himself like 2 years ago. But yeah, because it's really easy to cross a diet. And the thing with those dieta plants too is like if you're doing like shrooms or ayahuasca, you take it, and next thing you're fine, right? I used to go to Starbucks after a ceremony, but you can't do that with a dieta, dude. Like you need like 30 days, 30 to 60 days. Like one time I was at like day 29, and I'm like, I'm fine. And I popped a beer open. Dude, that was a really bad mistake, dude. That was really scary. Yeah. So there's this got a whole different level. But what I was going to say is there's a level of like this discipline. So I think part of this is like what happens is what we think is true is we think that if we just do lots of medicine, lots of drugs, that's what's going to bring higher consciousness. But that's not true. What Because higher consciousness is governed by a spiritual hierarchy, if you will, right? And this we're talking about consciousness here. We're not talking about pure awareness. We're just talking about consciousness, right? So, but that's governed by a spiritual hierarchy, and that hierarchy is it's looking for wisdom, right? It's looking for wisdom and discipline. So, for example, 3 years ago, I was really abusing the rapé. I was probably doing rapé 20 times a day. It was getting so bad I couldn't breathe. So I got it again like 3 or 4 days ago, and I'm like worried. I'm like, dude, I can't ever get into that addictive cycle with the tobacco. It was crazy. And so I've been quite good. Haven't done any for 2 days. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and use it ceremonially. So I'm going to do it on the full moon here, like in 6 or 7 days, whenever that is. I'm going to do a ceremony because what tends to happen is that when you focus ceremonial, and you don't have to do this with medicine, but when you actually have a disciplined spiritual practice, right? Um, right, those it has a big impact. One of the guys I met up in Peru, this guy Ryan Dunn, who was a member of the Facebook group for years. Funny guy, man. Love that guy. But he's really interesting, Ryan, man. He's the guy. He went to Africa he wanted to get an authentic iboga experience, and the tribe tried to poison him. It was really terrible. But what I really liked about him is he was doing this kind of stuff. He was doing like a 20-day prayer session to a specific saint, and see that kind of thing. It's not like is visually like immediately satisfying, but I'm pretty convinced that that kind of practice is what produces real spiritual results, right? And I think part of the problem is when we're doing when we're doing these big like super doses of ayahuasca, we're not really like why we because we're looking for big experience, right? A big story, something amazing. But a lot of that is Still water runs deep. I think that's a great way of putting it, Megan. Um, yeah. So that's the thing. Like, so I just started a new sadhana. There's like that tantric Shivoham group. They've got a new mantra for. What's interesting is I was getting into this whole Krishna thing again for the last week, and then the new Shivoham mantra for this sadhana is for Vishnu, of whom I think Krishna is like the fifth. The fifth. I don't know what it is. Which what is that? The avatar. Let me just see. Krishna. Krishna is the fifth av- avatar of Vishnu. Is that correct? He's the eighth avatar of Vishnu. What do I know, man? Right? So it's interesting. But the whole thing is like I've done a bunch of these tantric sadhanas, and what's funny is when you're starting off the sadhana, like you're not really comfortable with the mantras and stuff. You're like, how do you say that? Om Namo Narayana. I can't remember right now. And so it takes you a couple of days to get into the vibe of the mantra, and you're repeating it, and then like after 3 or 4 days, and you've got to do the mantra for an hour to 3 hours every day, but then it starts doing something, right? And you can feel it. It's like really factable. You can feel it like in your body. Um, so it's this sort of commitment. It's this spiritual commitment. It's one of the interesting things too. Like for example, if you want to be initiated into Tibetan Buddhism, that would be fun. It'd be cool to be initiated into Tibetan Buddhism, right? But if you're going to be initiated into Tibetan Buddhism, you've got to you've got to prostrate. What is it, 100,000 times or more? So it usually takes people 4 years to do all the prostrations they've got to do before you get initiated. So there's like a barrier. There's like a gatekeeper, right? So if you're not willing to do all these prostrations, then you don't get initiated. And what will happen is you'll start thinking, well, initiation is probably bullshit anyway. I can't be bothered prostrating the ground. This stuff's stupid, and you quit, right? But the initiation isn't bullshit, and these simple practices, which aren't earth shaking, right? They're not like, oh, I saw divinities or whatever. Those sort of build the framework, or what's the word? Framework, I guess, is probably a good enough word. They build the framework for spiritual development, right? Um, which is it even necessary? All that stuff. I mean, there's some really interesting initiations and paths of religious paths and whatnot. But and it's easy to get caught up in that. It's easy to get caught up in the discussions of those techniques and the experiences, right? But the big thing, obviously, is this whole non-duality thing. Um, yeah, listen. I don't know if you're still here. True Life Stories. That's what you should do, dude. You should get a rasa transmission, right? So that's like a transmission from a guru of the Ramana Maharshi lineage. And so the guy who does that is there's a bunch of people who do it, but the main guy there is Ramaji, who's an American guy, but he does it. I think he does it online. It's pretty expensive, but a lot of people on this group have done that or related to the group. I think maybe probably 50 people at least have done the rasa transmission, which is there's a bunch of transmissions. So but I think that non-dual transmission is really powerful, especially for people who are like doing psychedelics and like because where'd you go? Where'd you go from doing psychedelics, right? Because there's got to be more to this than just cranking up the dosage, right? And I guess who's that guy who died recently? Um, yeah, everybody's gonna make a living. Vegan dolls, they're all gonna make a living, right? So I mean, fair enough. I mean, Ramaji is interesting though, because when he teaches people, he asks for a commission. So when I was doing the transmissions with Krister, apparently Ramaji gets a percentage of every transmission that Krister does. So he's got a great business model there, right? Which seems kind of like shitty, right? I mean, it should be free, that kind of stuff, maybe. But I mean, people have to make a living. So, I mean, fair enough, right? Fair enough. And it is authentic, right? That's a really thing. Dude, you should do that, Vegan Dolls. Ah, you're a witch. Are you really a witch then? Yeah. Witches can have regular jobs too. You see, that's the thing, because I was doing the transmissions there for a while too. But then, and then I think about this because, like, I see a lot of these guys like on YouTube, like doing their YouTube channels for businesses and stuff, and I think about doing that. Like, but I mean, I just say I don't know if I can do it. I mean, I guess I could do it, but I mean, well, I mean, to be fair, I've done plenty of classes, right? I've done plenty of classes, like doing stuff, and maybe money taints everything. I don't know, maybe not. I mean, it depends how you do it. I mean, you can do things honestly to be cool. I've certainly been thinking about not doing these live chats anymore because they're sort of unstructured, and it's easy to see why I don't have a huge following on YouTube. But all you really need is like 10 focused minutes, really clearly defined, like with really thinking things through, which is useful, right? It's useful to people. And that may be the way to do this kind of stuff. But who, Igor Kufayev? No, no, I really disagree. I think Igor Kufayev is like top notch, man. I don't think I think it'd be hard pressed to say anything negative about Igor Kufayev. I think that guy's awesome. Though he's just, and I don't think he's really pushing it like financially either. Igor, no, dude, you need to listen to more of him, man. He's not. I don't think he's a narcissist at all. He's like awesome, dude. That whole thing. I mean, I think the thing with Igor is he's. I mean, I can see where you're coming from, maybe, but I mean, he's like an artist, right? He was, right? He was an artist, and like, or he is an artist, and that was where he started connecting with Tantra. I think he's the best at explaining Tantra. I think he's really, really good at explaining Tantra. Um, and I also I think he's not narcissistic. I think there's other people who I don't want to mention, but there's another famous teacher who's more popular than Igor, who wrote some of the books I often speak about, but he's more in that line. He seems like a prima donna to me, smart as fuck, but um, yeah, but I really like Igor, man. I was actually Igor's got a retreat in Mexico in October, and I was thinking, I wonder if I could like I was wondering if I could go up there just hang out for a bit. Not that I really need to, because like what he's teaching, I can already do that stuff, or like I've already been there. So it's like but I just like his vibe, man. Um, he said Joel Osteen. No, I think you're misjudging him. Have you've seen this video on Kamatkara, right? That's like my favorite video of all time. And he just wrote a book about it too, which it's on my list of things to do. The Kamatkara. Let me just see if I can find that and just put it in here, because I always like the Kamatkara. Igor Kufayev. Yeah, I was calling him Victor Kufayev for like 10 years, wasn't I? Here is the hidden. Man, that video is so awesome, dude. There is. He's your mortal enemy, yeah. He's great. So that's the Kamatkara video. That video is just a classic. And part of the reason it's a classic is because is because I get it. Right? Like what happens is there's a granularity of awareness. There's a granularity of awareness which we're often unaware of. But I guess through initiation, you start becoming aware. Hey, vegan dolls, like you're a witch. How did you become a witch? Was that just through like ritual stuff, or were you like? Is it run your family? There's a lot of like witch people in Chile. There are a lot of like hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he's playing. He's being a teacher, and he's in a way like I don't think he's superior. I think he's being authoritative, right? Which I guess you could say is superior arrogant, but he's not authoritative like he's he's authoritative because he knows the material, and he doesn't just know it on intellectual level. He knows it on an experiential level, and that's comforting to have somebody who's got the what I like about him. He's got the intellectual command to explain complex concepts. The thing is like for example, there's so many channels of people doing shitloads of ayahuasca and everything else, and but we don't really have the intellectual ability to explain it in the fine grain of spiritual traditions and what it actually means, and he does, you know. And I think the other guy, Christopher Wallace, does too. But Christopher Wallace has got a sort of lefty liberal sort of point of view, which doesn't appeal to me. But they didn't call it that. Yeah, you do the moon the menstruation rituals. All the women here do that, man. They're all doing the menstruation rituals and the full moon and all this stuff. It's crazy. Like there's so much occult stuff. In my classes, like I'm teaching classes this semester, just a couple of classes at the university, but like back in the day when I was having the spiritual awakening, man, I spoke about this stuff way too much. But like I never talk about it anymore, really. But I was in my class last week. It came up. We were talking about something at the end of the class. There was a few students left in class, and I brought this up. And dude, there was only like 5 students in class, and two of them are psychics. Like one of them are mediums, psychic mediums. Two of them out of 5, right? It's crazy. Like it's like when does that ever happen? But I think that kind of stuff. People are much more switched on here about that. I think in America, people are more caught up with this whole fantasy we call the modern world, right? But I think in South America, or at least seemingly, people seem to be a little more tuned into this sort of alternative reality of consciousness, or whatever you want to call that. I'm having a cramp here in my stomach for some bizarre reason. Yeah. I don't really have much to say tonight. I just thought I'd come on and say hello for a bit. My grandma told me before she died that she was part of the Immortal League of Trees. Isn't that crazy? That's interesting. Yeah. It doesn't sound that crazy. You never did ayahuasca, did you, vegan dolls, or did you? Probably not. You see, the ayahuasca is the Rosetta Stone of the plant world. The pups. Well, there's a couple of dogs here. Oh man, yeah, there was a sad dog story this week or 2 weeks ago. So like, I live out here in the middle of nowhere, and there's 2 dogs who live on the parcella here. Um, and they sleep out here in my deck, which is cool. They never help. Like I've been robbed, and then they never actually protect you when shit hits the fan. But like, it's a long story. Yeah, whatever, dude. Yeah. What did you do all the things in the wrong way, vegan dolls? Well, you know what the thing is, right? The thing is, don't even explain it. The thing is, everybody does everything in the wrong way. You do everything in the wrong way until you discover the right way. And the right way is like what your granny said or whatever, right? It's like what did you say? Like the river runs deep or something? Just shut up and yeah, just be quiet, work on spiritual practice. To be honest with you, I've been like, no, I'm actually losing. This happens from time to time. I start to lose my desire to do videos. Um, exactly right, and probably not just with drugs, with everything. Seriously, dude. Right? Hey, but you turned out okay. Although I worry about you, vegan dolls. That Instagram you've got is a bit over the top, right? It's a bit over the top. I haven't been there for a while, but there you go. Yeah. Well, the thing is about these big traumatic experiences, pushing the envelope too hard, and chilling out, being aware, doing a sadhana, doing thoughtful things. It's almost like chaos magic, but like low key chaos magic. It's just actually just being aware of divinity, you know, being aware of divinity and or consciousness. Like I find this a lot is like there's an event horizon between like the point of focus and the reality of the world, and that's astonishing though. It's like yeah, I guess the qigong guys are kind of trying to play around with that a little bit, but like when you can actually feel it, um dude, the rotten Nazi corpses, I got to tell you, I still think about those guys. I was thinking about them yesterday. Just the aperture. Yeah, that stuff bothers me. I mean, I guess it's the funny thing is it's moving into pure awareness, like the non-duality really is about the only protection from that. The thing is like the astral realm, if you're balanced in the astral realm, that can be a really sort of interesting place to be. But if you're cultivating shit, if you're cultivating negative vibrations, which many people are doing, uh it's really dangerous. I mean, it's funny because like ultimately, like I mean, it's not a cop out. I mean, ultimately, you could say that, you know, well, I was going to say everything is an illusion, but that's not what the Bhagavad Gita says. I mean, and that's not the message of Tantra either. The message of Tantra is that, yeah, we are pure awareness, but there's a descent of divinity through into the physical world, and that is infinite in its scope, in its own way. It's the Shakti aspect, right? Shakti. And in those energy circuits, you can tunnel your consciousness into all kinds of places, depending on your energy structure. And that's where the those entities came from. But that was also at the time. How did that? I'm trying to remember how that happened. That may have just, yeah. The thing is like those were coming through at the time I was learning how to cultivate energy, right? And so the cultivation of energy and this knowing, it's knowing what the right frequency of energy is, like the right frequency, because it's really easy. It's really, it's crazy. This world is so fucked up, like, because you see it happening. I see people cultivating these energy circuits, which I know are connected to entities like that. And dude, it's like endemic. It's happening everywhere in society. Like these energy circuits are being cultivated like in serious ways. It's crazy. Um, it's crazy, but at the physical level, it seems attractive. Nobody engages in evil because it's evil. It's evil because it's attractive, right? It's wow, right? That's the danger. And also, it's something that old Krishna talks about there in the Bhagavad Gita, right? About always moving your consciousness back to Krishna, which is also another word of saying moving consciousness into non duality, or at least into awareness of consciousness itself, right? And the thing is like the message of the Bhagavad Gita is, like this is the thing, is Krishna says, is Arjuna says to Krishna, like, I don't want to kill these people, right? He's like, they're my friends. I know them. I respect them. I don't want to kill them. And the message of the Gita is like, listen, you just have to engage. That's the rules of the playing field is you have to engage, right? But never identify, right? So you have to engage, but you don't identify with the engagement. But his job is to be a warrior king, right? So that's what you got to do. So it's like, what is your job? So you do that to the best of your ability, and you don't. While maybe you engage, but you always maintain awareness of Krishna as the source, or Shakti as the source, right? And so it's these engagements with reality. Each This is tantra. It's each word, each emanation of thought as it emerges is the membrane of membrane. It's the event horizon, right? It's kind of like a membrane, though. It's kind of like it's almost like a surface as the awareness moves out. Is awareness is if it's moving out, it's almost like a membrane. It's like a sort of surface which is moving out, right? But that surface is intersecting. Might be people listening to your words. It might be people dealing with your bullshit or whatever, right? But that interaction, being aware of it, and it's funny, I've got a bad habit of like, oh, I like to drink beer, not in huge quantities, of course, but but the funny thing is, you have 2 or 3 beers, and it drops you down from that awareness. It's funny. It's like, oh, yeah, I just feel like old fashioned Scott from 15 years ago, like, well, like whatever, right? But then the funny thing is, the next day, it descends, the higher awareness descends, Krishna descends upon me. And I'm like, dude, why am I even wasting my time? It's so inferior. It's so inferior to the awareness of the of this focal point, which I hate to say it, but it's like the Kamatkara. It's the Kamatkara. It's the what does he call that? He's got such a great way, Igor, of expressing that. You need to watch that again and ask forgiveness. It's the what does he call it? He's got a great way of expressing the Kamatkara, but it's the I don't even know how to explain it. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm really happy that I can appreciate that level of consciousness. It's such a blessing, you know? Yeah. Right? Exactly. It's funny, Candida, dude, that's so true. What's funny too is my stepdaughter was making she's on this kick where she makes she's doing like penne alla vodka, like the the pasta with tomato vodka sauce. So she made some the other night. She didn't make me any. So the next day I got up, I thought, you know what, I'll make some, so I did it. And I always figured like when you cook the vodka, it cooks the vodka off. It didn't cook off. I got drunk off a plate of pasta. But the funny thing is that it's Candida, dude. It's a sentient being. So true. Well, what's funny is like I'm on this thing where I've cut out coffee, I've cut out milk. I should probably cut out gluten too, but I'm still doing that. So, but it's totally changed my life, dude. It's like I feel so much better. Oh my God. Just the elimination of coffee. I can't even tell you, and dairy, coffee and dairy. I can't even believe how much of an effect that has had on my life, just eliminating those things, you know? I mean, from time to time I'll have some, but like generally it's gone, you know? Dude, vegan dolls, this is too real for me, dude. Yeah. I remember about 10 years ago I tried to do a candida free diet and it was horrible and impossible. I think probably the thing is just fasting, you know. Candida. So I guess that's the Jordan Peterson thing, just take beef, right? My problem is that I've got this message coming in that I've got to be a vegetarian, you know. But it just well, you're gonna tell me that's the candida speaking, right? Probably that's interesting. Could be, I guess, right? But it does seem to be a Kundalini thing. Anyway, listen, I'm done, man. I'm not really talking about anything. I'm not being valuable here. I'm gonna leave this video up for a day and I'm gonna delete it, I think. But yeah. Although what's funny is if you do the keto diet, man, you lose all desire for sugar. You really do. It's like who cares, right? There's a lot of benefits to that keto thing and just going on to the eggs and whatever. And oh, it's really you feel good. You get rid of all that candida, as you say, right? Well, my cat wants to go out. Anyway, yeah, you vegan. Nice talking to you. Yeah, I guess it's just us. It's like a date, vegan dolls. Take care. Don't murder anybody for your sugar fix, you know? And yeah, peace out. I'm tired. You need to get like a my free guru, right? Dude, you know, you're the guru, vegan dolls.